In this lesson, we are going to discuss the aggregation functions in the DAX language. To move forward though, I need you to understand a few concepts, and we have lessons here in the channel about each of these concepts. In the Power BI course, the Power BI playlist, there is a lesson about the differences between calculated columns and measures. I need you to go watch that video if you haven't already. And I need you to understand the concepts of aggregation, grouping, and iteration. These lessons are in our Power Query Foundations course. And at last, I need you to understand the underlying structure for DAX formulas. And I taught that in a previous video in this very same playlist. So please go watch these videos if you're not totally familiar with these concepts. Okay, let's move forward. And from now on, I will assume you already know all of the concepts I just mentioned. And again, if you don't, go and watch those lessons. They are all for free here on our channel. Okay, I will use for this lesson, the examples I'm going to use are in this table. This table, let me open it. It's an Excel file. You already know how to import Excel files into Power Query and move it into Power BI. This was all explained in our Power Query Foundations course. And in the first column, I have the employees' names. The second column, it's their departments. And then I have the monthly hours, how many hours each employee worked during a certain month, and their base salary. And that's it. Using a very short table is good for examples because we can prove that the DAX function is doing what it was actually supposed to do. For example, if I want to sum up everything in the monthly hours table, I can check, and when I create the DAX function in Power BI, I can check if it really has 1500 as a total and 100 as an average. So for this column, the average is 100 and the sum is 1500. So now I have a reference to make sure I'm doing it right in Power BI. So let's go back to Power BI. And in Power BI, I'm going to create a new measure. I will right click on the table's title and new measure. And I'm going to call this measure one. And I'm going to use the sum function. And as you already know, a function starts with an opening parenthesis and ends in a closing parenthesis, and everything in between are the arguments. And this argument will be a reference to the monthly hours table. And I'm going to refer to employees table and the monthly hours column. Well, it's the employees table and the monthly hours column. Okay, so our complete reference is supposed to show you, start with the table's name, employees is the table's name, and monthly hours between brackets is going to be the column's name. So we have a complete reference, table name and column name, and now Power BI knows exactly what it has to sum. And now I will hit enter and you see nothing. Of course, as you know, measures don't show their values unless you bring it into a visual. In this case, I'm bringing it into a card, and there you go. We know that 1500 is actually the total hours in the monthly hours column, and I can bring it into the table visual and the bar chart visual, and all of them will show the same values. But as you already know, we can change the context of the visual, bringing in, for example, the department. And now let me just rearrange the columns, and now I have the total for each department. For example, the finance department, the sum is 200. Let's check if it's right. In the table view, I can check that the finance department has 2 people, and one of them has 50 hours, the other one 150. So the total is 200. Just like here, it's right. Marketing, 250. We can see that the marketing department has 2 people, 150 plus 100, so 250. Marketing 250. It's right, okay. And in this visual, I can, for example, bring department to the y-axis and employee to the y-axis, and now I have 2 different views, and then I can have a view of total by department, group by department, or the total by employee. In this case, the totals are not really totals because the total for Emily, for example, is the actual value for Emily. I cannot Emily is just one single person, so the total for this single person is actually the same value as the original table, 200. For Emily, 200. Okay, so this is a very simple function. And what if we want to create the calculated column with the same measure? Let me use with the same formula. Actually, let me just copy, Control C, and I'm going to copy this this formula, and I'm going to create a calculated column with the same formula. And how can I create calculated columns? I go to the table view, and from here I can use the new column button, and I'm going to call this new column. I'm going to call it some hours summation. I'm going to call it summation, and use the Control V, use the very same DAX formula, and there you go. Now I have the summation. And as we've already seen in other lessons, the sum function, it's an aggregation function. So there's no way Power BI can, with this function, show you different values, because of course you are summing up everything in the monthly hours column, and the total has to be shown in each, has to appear in each of the rows. Of course, we can change that. There is another very important function that can help us change that. So by default, and now we are passing more details than the details I showed you in the lesson regarding the difference between measures and calculated columns. As we move forward and learn more DAX, there's little details that we didn't mention there because that wasn't the scope of the lesson. But from now on, we need to understand. And I'm coming back in a second, but before that, I want to show you. Let me delete this from the model. And in the other lesson, about the differences between calculated columns and measures in the DAX course, I told you that we necessarily have to create calculated columns in the table view. But actually, that's not 100% true, because I would say this is the best way to do it from the table view, because from the table view, you can see the whole thing. You can see the table, you can see everything that's going on. But actually, from the report view, you can create calculated columns, although you cannot see them. Hey, a lot of people watch my videos, learn a bunch, but forget to hit the like button or subscribe to the channel. If you've made it this far, it means the content helped you somehow. So go ahead and give it a like and hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating free content like this, and it also tells YouTube to show you more videos like this one. It's quick and it makes a big difference. Thanks. So from the from the modeling tab, there's a new column button. So this is the same button as this one, and you can create a calculated column from here actually. And let's call it again summation, and use the same DAX formula, and there you go. The calculated column was created from the report view, but actually you couldn't see what you were doing. You had to actually be sure of what you were doing. So from the table view, I would say this is the best way to do it, because you actually can see everything you're doing. So this is the first detail I wanted to add on top of what we learned from that lesson in the Power BI course. And the second detail is that although by default, Power BI will show the result of this summation in each single row, actually we can change it. So it's the default, and this is going to happen all the time whenever you create a new aggregating function. But we can change it. For us to change it, we need a few more steps, and I'm going to use a calculate function. I don't want you to worry about learning the calculate function at this point. We're going to have at least 2 or 3 lessons exploring all of detail. This is one of the most important DAX functions, and we are going to explore it very carefully. I just wanted to understand what we actually can do to change this single value showing in each row. I can change the filter context and have, for example, I changed the filter context, and we are going to talk a lot about filter context and grouping context. In my view, I prefer to use the term grouping context than filter context, but everyone else will talk about filter context. And don't worry about it. I just want to introduce these ideas to you so you can keep it in your mind, but we just to raise your curiosity, because this is going to be very important moving forward. And now you can see that I still have an aggregation function, but we now are aggregating department by department. You can see that now I have a sum only for production, only the hours for production, 100, 200, 300, only for marketing, only for sales, only for finance, and so on. So now I changed the context of the table, the filter context, to have my summation by department and not an overall summation for the entire column. This is so cool. And now I have forced the table to look just like the visual. You can see that for the visual I have finance 200, and now here I have finance is 200. Of course I still have all of the rows, but the total is the same for each row. That refers to finance. Sales is going to be 250 and sales 250. So pretty much I used a DAX function to manipulate the default aggregation. This was just to raise your curiosity and keep you motivated. So please stay tuned and subscribe to our channel, share this content with your friends, and please leave a comment below. Your questions are important and they help us reach more people and helps us keep motivated to create this kind of content. And now we already learned how to use all those details about the sum function, but we can change. And instead of the sum function, I can use the average function. The average will do just the same thing, only instead of summing up everything, I'm going to take an average. Now, from the Excel that we saw in the beginning of the class, we know that the overall average for the entire column is really 100, but in this visual, as the visual context, the filter context is different, we have the average only for finance, only for HR. For example, maintenance. For maintenance, we have 2 employees. It's 150 plus 50. It's 200 divided by 2. It equals 100, which is actually the correct average. And now instead of an average, let's say I want the maximum value from the monthly hours column. And we can see that from the monthly hours column, the highest value is 200. And that's right, 200. In this case, I have the maximum value per department. For the marketing department, my highest value is 150. This is my maximum. It was marketing. And then marketing 150, it's the maximum number. And the same way, instead of max, I can use the min function. And now this will bring me the minimum value, which is 50. I can see that 50 is the minimum value in the column. It appears more than once, but still it's the minimum. And I could also use, for example, the standard deviation, STDEV dot. And there's 2 functions for standard deviation: the standard deviation of the population and the standard deviation of the sample. We are not going to discuss this statistical difference. Maybe we will create a playlist on DAX statistical functions in the future. I'm just going to use the one for the population, and it works just the same way. Of course, you can see 0 for some employees and for some departments, because of course, to calculate the standard deviation, you need at least 2 values. And if you're considering only individual employees, so there's no difference between their hours and their hours. There's only 1 value for each person. So there's no way you can calculate standard deviation other than 0. And the same goes for departments. So departments that only have 1 person, for example, HR and IT. HR and IT only have 1 person, so the standard deviation will be 0. Okay, and there's also a very important aggregation function. That's the count function, but the count function is actually a family of count functions. So I'm going to explore them in a specific videos. Please, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and make comments below. This is going to help us keep motivated. Like I said, this will help us reach more people and share this knowledge. See you in the next lesson.